Welcome everyone. Jeff, you have the PowerPoint?
Welcome everyone. So yeah, we're here talking today about the anti-racism and a book study. So again, in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, play, raise our next generation, and build communities on the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, including the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Kainai, Blood tribe, Siksika, Pagan, Piikani, Skipi, Pikunu nations, the Tsuut'ina Nation, Bearspaw, Chiniki, Stoney Nakoda Nation, also home to Métis Nation Region 3, who have been here much longer than our group. So a bit of a origin story, and for sure, Will and Doug, also Sebastian participated, and Tamara, I think, is also here, participated in some of this. So we, Will and Doug and I were asked to present kind of on behalf of Alberta Men's Network at an anti-racism vigil and action meeting in June. And they're to represent white men speaking out against police violence and specifically murder of George Floyd, as well as recognizing the victims of police violence, the Black victims of police violence in Canada. So during the discussion, during the vigil, there was one white man who did many of the things that white men often do. So he came in and took up a lot of space and was kind of speaking inappropriately during the vigil about how great he was about being his anti-racism work. And so this really kind of hit the three of us because I don't know about you guys, but I've been that guy as well. And so am that guy sometimes still. And so to be able to create a space for us to do some of our work and learn more about anti-racism and interacting in a better way, as well as encourage each other to within this anti-racist work to hold each other accountable to kind of our commitments. So we started off with principles. We're committed to learning, accountability, and action. We're here to take responsibility to do our own work. We drew these from the Anti-Racism, Anti-Colonization Learning Series, which there's a big group that put that together in, I believe it was 2017, which was really influential, learning from Black Lives Matter principles, as well as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and some of those principles. So we reviewed those. We established kind of our relationship to Black, Indigenous, racialized people and white women, that we didn't want to create a space that was exclusive for white men, but that when people who identified in this way came to the book study, so the book study wasn't closed only to white men, because we didn't want to replicate just this idea that where white men gather in groups, not many good things happen. So we wanted to have it opened as a way to be accountable, to listen and learn from what was said. And then we established kind of our relationship to each other. So we talked about the practice of calling in, supporting and encouraging each other's anti-racist actions. We recognize our training as being expert and grandstanding and competitive as white men, and committed to kind of work against that. So those that was kind of our starting point. So how'd it go? We shared the information through the Alberta Assembly of Social Workers, Alberta Men's Network, And then one of the AMN members shared it to this group, Freezer Burn, which is a 2,500 member group, I think in Alberta, of activists and artists who are kind of associated with Burning Man, for those who know about that. And really, and then on our personal social media, and we found that this resonated, this conversation about white men's roles and how we can engage in anti-racist unlearning and action. So we picked a time that worked for most people for our first meeting. We sent out and pre-read article White Fragility, which really kind of we wanted to do that. It's, even though it's written by a white person, to really, there was insights there that we wanted about, this is going to be uncomfortable for us and we need it to be in doing our own work. And so we wanted to, instead of having that unacknowledged and that pressure there of our own fragility and having race-based conversations, that we would have that as part of our knowledge entering this, and be able to add some resiliency and be able to have these discussions. So it created, as a process, we created a collective list of potential books to study. We picked together through a process. So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. And we went in as a group, and we didn't pre-plan everything. We kind of followed what people wanted, and followed what the people who showed up wanted. So the big takeaways from the experience for us, and for sure jump in, I'll kind of start us off. So we were all a little uncomfortable, but not, but yes, but uncomfortable admitting our discomfort. So you see kind of the feeling, feeling each other out, finding the tension, holding each other accountable and reflective. So this one thing that we learned, like, this is relational work, and it's really difficult to hear some of these things, and the way that they're said too, as we learn together, can be like, oh, I knew that. And this was one of the things about kind of putting our commitments about not being competitive and calling in, and not grandstanding or being expert, and really kind of putting judgment aside too, was I think something that we practiced and need to work on. And then actually, Will or Doug, do you want to jump in for some of these?
Sure. Yeah, I think the whole process was, I know Jeff, Doug, and myself were all coming from social work backgrounds, academic backgrounds, and activism and stuff like that. So I think the three of us definitely recognize that, like, we might be coming into this group being hot-headed and like, oh yeah, we know what anti-racism is, blah blah blah, we're super anti-racist, right? And really making sure that we're leaving that at the door, because I think the big thing that we started recognizing quite quickly was that it's ignorance, right? It's ignorance mixed with arrogance. That whenever me as a white person thinks that I know anything about being an anti-racist, it probably means I don't know anything about being an anti-racist, right? Because I haven't lived that life. I'm the pinnacle of privilege, right? As a white guy in a first world country, middle class, not coming from a lower class background either. I'm at the top of the top, right? And whenever myself says that, oh, I know how to be an activist or an anti-racist, I'm actually taking the power away from being able to learn. And we really want to avoid that. And that's why where a lot of these things came from, right, is that we want to make sure that the group was open, that we don't get into some sort of group think of, we know everything, so there's nothing left for us to learn, right? And really for people to come in and especially BIPOC individuals, we be allowed to come in and call us out, right? If we're making statements, I think for myself, especially, but amongst the three of us, we want to make sure that the conversations we were having were going to make us feel uncomfortable, and for myself, every time I went to the book club, if I didn't leave feeling uncomfortable at the end of it, I felt like I hadn't gotten enough out of it, which is ironic. But I think it's part of that privilege piece, right? That I'm so used to being in this little bubble, that bubble needs to be poked, and it needs to be put a bunch of holes in, and for me to be able to humble myself. And I'm only, I truly feel like I have a very long way to go. So, and this is just one step, right? For white men and men as well, just in general, to be able to come and kind of share and talk and learn about things that we, as a white guy, I can't say I know anything about. And if I do say I know anything about it, that is again going down that path of privilege and thinking I know I'm holier than thou, right? So that's my plug.
We're here to tell you you don't.
I don't know anything, so.
And that's kind of the position that we're all in. There's no kind of fighting against this, like there's good white people, and just saying like we've got this privilege and that we're here to do the work. One of the things so talk about the system and not individuals as racist. So when we're talking to I've got experiences with family and different personal experiences where trying to engage in some of the conversations about privilege and racism and really kind of coming up against those barriers, from the book, really being able to start by talking about systemic racism and how the structures are positioned to create experiences that that my white family, for instance, doesn't have. I think that was helpful to just have more productive conversations, and then also kind of that last point about just because it doesn't happen to me doesn't mean it doesn't happen to you. So that logic, really kind of applying that and taking that to some of those conversations as well, I found helpful. Doug, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just clarify. I'm not really from a social work background, so I'm.
Yeah. By marriage. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think part of it is we learned. I think we all learned really quickly that when we went outside of our group, that it was much harder to talk about it than we first imagined it would be. So I think that was a good point for us to learn very quickly, that we wanted to have a space where we could practice kind of talking about this stuff so that we felt more comfortable when we were in other situations, like talking to your family, talking to people that you meet. And that was part of where we talked about, talking about the system, trying not to make it an individual fight or attack on somebody, that we needed to just practice that. I think that also led, I know for me, the chapter about, checking your privilege, which, has become a catchphrase, but it's also something that, especially as white men, it's really important that you do take the time to check your privilege, learn to understand even what privilege is. Most people don't, especially white people, I would say, don't really know that much about privilege, don't want to talk about it. But we have to, again, look at that, and don't wait till you're in the middle of a discussion to try figure out what your privilege is and what your privilege is, how that affects you. That, actually take some time and think about all the advantages you've had in your life and how that helped you get where you are, how that influences how you think about things. And also just be aware that if you have a privilege, that means you have an advantage. And by definition, that means somebody else has a disadvantage. So how does that influence what you're going to do? So next time, make sure that your champion for the person that you know has a disadvantage, to try change the system to make it more fair. Because as we know, the system isn't fair now. And as long as we're not saying anything about it, it's going to continue to be unfair until we challenge it and change it.
Yeah, especially for the ones that we're a part of. I think that's, yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Doug.
And I think the other thing, sorry, just to add to it, that we started taking away that it is, something I really appreciated about what Olu was talking about in her book was that it's very different the way you talk to people about racism and anti-racism, depending on who you're speaking to, not just if someone is BIPOC or not, but also just like what their experiences in life are, right? The way I talk to another social worker will be very different to the way I talk to one of my old construction friends about anti-racism, right? And it was really great from this book and book study to learn these different strategies that are actually I'm able to implement, right? Instead of me trying to run blindly as an activist through society, she really provided these step-by-step ways to engage in different conversations and different strategies to use and stuff like that. Which, honestly, it was I don't read a ton of books, and that was like the Bible to how I can kind of be approach these kind of conversations. No, I shouldn't say Bible, but a textbook really for me to be able to follow. So
awesome. Thanks, Will. So what would we do differently? I think start with positionality. So a big thing we kind of we're trying to recruit other white men, and we're unsuccessful at that endeavor beyond us. So we would think probably not start with just recruiting white men, but which creates only a resource for white men. And it felt kind of like replicating privilege or oppression in the way that we put it together, making it almost seem exclusive. So that didn't feel good. And then as the group gets bigger, maybe open up that opportunity, and then or maybe go off into kind of different areas of focus or interest, and then also kind of start with, we didn't necessarily do this well, but starting with our positionality and where people kind of saw themselves and their relationship to kind of the topic. So what are kind of some of our next moves? So for Black History Month, we are coordinating a screening of the documentary We Are the Roots, so Black settlers and their experiences of discrimination on the Canadian prairies, with presented with Dr. David Est, who is created the video, and an esteemed social work scholar nationally in Canada. So February 16th at 7 p.m. We'll be sending out an evite for that soon. We're doing another book study, so we want to kind of launch that probably on the February 16th event, and then always open to more actions. And there also wanted to drop a note that there is another anti-racism, anti-colonization learning series coming, not from us, but from the first group. So stay tuned.